11 o'clock. That old grandfather clock in the Lancaster place boomed, its sound bouncing all over the dang mansion. Elena Carter. She was easing shut some storybook, leather cover and all, trying not to wake up little Sophie. The kid, all of 5 years old, was fighting sleep like it was her worst enemy. "Just one more story, Miss Elena," she begged, hugging that beat-up teddy bear of hers. Her eyes, big and blue, were practically begging, and her blonde curls were a mess on that fancy silk pillow of the king-size bed. Elena just shook her head, real gentle, and ran her hand through Sophie's hair. "It's way past your bedtime, honey. Let's get you back to your room." Sophie's lip started to wobble. "But I want to wait for Daddy. He said he'd try to get home early tonight." That hit Elena pretty hard. William Lancaster, CEO of Lancaster Industries. The guy was something else. Powerful, smart as heck, and handsome enough to stop traffic. But early wasn't a word he knew. Elena had been Sophie's nanny for 6 months, and she'd seen that little girl's hope get crushed night after night. "Your dad's got important meetings, remember?" Elena said, keeping her voice soft, even though she was getting frustrated. Sophie deserved better than just promises he couldn't keep. Sophie looked down, her voice barely a whisper. "He always has meetings. I just want him to kiss me goodnight like he used to." Elena's heart squeezed. Sophie didn't talk much about her mom, Clara, the woman who took off 3 years ago, leaving William to raise their kid all alone. Elena hesitated a second, then sighed. "All right, we can wait a little while longer, but only till you fall asleep, okay?" Sophie's face lit up, and she snuggled down under the covers. Elena knew this was a bad idea. She was stepping over the line, getting into William Lancaster's personal stuff. That master bedroom was huge, but kinda cozy too. Dark wood furniture, fancy Egyptian cotton sheets in a dark blue color, and the smell of his aftershave hung in the air, making her a little nervous. She told herself she'd leave the second Sophie was out cold. But that bed was unbelievably comfortable, and the sound of Sophie breathing nice and steady was almost hypnotizing. Just for a minute, she thought, just till Sophie's totally asleep. And that's how Elena ended up falling asleep too, not having a clue that William Lancaster was on his way home. The bedroom door creaked open, and a slice of light from the hallway cut through the dim room. William Lancaster was standing there, his blue eyes sharp, taking in the scene. Then he just froze. There was his daughter, Sophie, all curled up on his king-size bed, looking more peaceful than she had in months. But then his eyes landed on Elena Carter next to her. His kid's nanny was sound asleep, breathing easy, with Sophie holding onto her arm like she wouldn't let go. William's eyebrows went up. What in the world was she doing in his room? He was a guy who really valued his privacy. His bedroom was off limits to everyone. And here she was. A flash of annoyance went through him, but it was quickly replaced by something else. Sophie was sleeping like an angel. No moving around, no little whimpers, no tear stains. William stayed there, watching them for a long while, seeing Sophie so at peace, so happy in Elena's company. Something heavy and unspoken settled in his chest. It wasn't just relief. It was longing. A longing he didn't even know he felt. But instead of dealing with it, he brushed it off. He walked across the room as quiet as a mouse. Elena moved a little, sensing someone was there. Her eyes, the color of amber, opened slowly. For just a second, she looked at him confused. Then she sat straight up, figuring out where she was. "Mr. Lancaster," she gasped, not wanting to wake Sophie. I can explain." William put his hand up, telling her to stop. He was watching his daughter. Sophie looked so peaceful, something that had been missing for a while. He sat on the edge of the bed, loosening his tie with a sigh. "Does she do this a lot?" Elena thought for a second, then nodded. Something in William's eyes flickered, something that looked dangerously like regret. But it was gone in a flash, replaced by his usual poker face. Finally, he turned to her, voice quiet but firm. "Stay." Elena blinked, wondering if she heard him right. "Excuse me." William leaned back, still watching Sophie. "If she wakes up and you're not here, she'll cry." It wasn't a command, it wasn't a plea, it was just a statement of fact. Elena hesitated. She had never seen William Lancaster like this, tired, thinking, and maybe a little bit lonely. She could say no. She should say no. But looking down at Sophie, who was still holding tight to her, Elena knew she couldn't walk away. "All right," she whispered. "I'll stay." William didn't say anything. He just nodded a little. But as he shifted in his seat, Elena heard him mumble under his breath. So soft it was barely more than a thought. "I never realized what I was missing." When Elena woke up the next morning, the first thing she noticed was that William Lancaster was gone. Only Sophie was still there, curled up next to her, with golden hair all over the silk pillow. But on the nightstand, a small note with bold, clear handwriting made Elena's heart jump. "Early meeting. Sophie was still asleep. I moved her to her room before I left. We need to talk. My office. 7 p.m. WL." Elena held the note, her heart racing. She couldn't stop thinking about the awkward silence between her and William last night, and the way he had looked at Sophie, with something unspoken in his eyes. The day went by like usual, making Sophie's breakfast, watching over her lessons, going with her in the big Lancaster estate gardens. But something was different, and Elena couldn't ignore it. William was trying. He came home earlier than normal, and he showed up at dinner, which was rare. He didn't just nod at Sophie and run off to his office. He actually listened to her. Elena watched from a distance, and she couldn't help but feel good seeing Sophie so happy with her dad. But what bothered her was the way William looked at her. That night, right at 7 p.m., Elena walked into William's office. He wasn't sitting at his desk like she expected. He was standing by the window, his tall shape dark against the setting sun. "Mr. Lancaster, about last night." He turned around, his blue eyes looking right at her. Elena, lose the fancy stuff. She blinked. "What do you mean?" William took a step forward, his voice quiet but sure. "Sophie loves you, and I trust you more than anyone else. We don't need to be so formal." Elena started to say something, but something in his face, so steady and real, made her stop. She swallowed. "All right, William." A tiny smile flickered across his face, so quick she almost missed it, but it made her heart skip a beat. She had crossed a line, and she knew that things would never be the same after this. The rumors started the next morning. Elena noticed it right away. The staff was giving her sneaky looks, and their conversations stopped the second she walked in. Even Mrs. Reynolds, the head housekeeper, was looking at her funny. Elena tried to ignore it, but when she walked through the kitchen, she overheard two maids talking about her. Who does she think she is, going from nanny to sleeping with the boss? Yeah, it's probably just a one-time thing. Guys like him don't take women like her seriously. Elena squeezed her fists, feeling angry and frustrated. She hadn't done anything wrong, but that didn't stop the gossip from spreading. And soon, she figured out where it all started. Because that morning, a familiar name showed up in the gossip columns. Vanessa Sterling, William's ex-fiancée. The perfect, gorgeous, powerful woman who almost married William. And now, she was back in town. The article didn't mention Elena by name, but it was obvious. Vanessa Sterling returns after years abroad. Could they have a second chance at love? It was a warning. Elena's stomach turned. She knew William wasn't the kind of guy to let the past control his life, but she couldn't ignore one thing. Vanessa belonged in his world. And her? She didn't. But before she could worry about it anymore, an even bigger problem showed up. A woman came to the Lancaster estate gates, looking angry and determined. Clara, Sophie's real mother. The woman who left her daughter 3 years ago. And now she was back, wanting something. She wanted Sophie back. The news of Clara's return spread fast. Elena was making Sophie's breakfast when Mrs. Reynolds showed up, looking worried. "Miss Elena, there's something you need to see." There was a thick envelope on the table, the handwriting scribbled all over it, all messy. Elena opened it, and her stomach dropped. Inside were a bunch of pictures, all lined up on purpose. Her leaving places late at night, hugging kids goodbye, standing on the doorsteps of rich families. They were all families she used to work for. But to someone who didn't know, they told a completely different story. There was a note too. "Leave quietly, or these pictures go straight to the Lancaster board." They won't believe you're innocent. BS. Elena's hands clenched, shaking. Her heart was thumping like crazy. If these pictures got out, the whispers wouldn't stop being whispers. They'd be like knives, cutting through her reputation, her life, and worst of all, Sophie's happiness. Vanessa, of course. But before she could think about it, William walked into the kitchen. Sophie ran to him, hugging his legs. "Daddy, Miss Elena made me pancakes." Elena forced herself to smile, hiding the fear she felt. But William was already watching her closely. She couldn't let him know. She couldn't let Sophie know. And then Clara walked in, right into the big Lancaster living room. She stood there with messy red-brown hair, but her eyes were burning. "I want my daughter back." The room got super quiet. Then William spoke, his voice as cold as ice. "You left Sophie 3 years ago. You have no right to be here." Clara smiled, a slow, satisfied smile. "You think so? Let's see what the courts say." And then she dropped the biggest bomb. "Oh, and by the way, I think the Lancaster board will love this. Sophie isn't William's real daughter." Clara's words cut through the room like a knife, sharp and nasty. Elena looked at William. He didn't look surprised. There was no shock, no denying it. Just a deadly calm in his blue eyes as he stared at Clara. He knew. Elena's heart felt tight. Clara crossed her arms, smirking. "You have no legal claim over her, William. She's not yours. But she is mine." William was scary calm. He stepped forward, his voice slow and careful. "Being a parent isn't about blood. It's about taking care of someone. And you walked away a long time ago." Clara blinked but stood her ground. "The law doesn't care about your feelings. I have every right to take her back." "No, you don't." William went to his desk, opened a drawer, and grabbed a stack of papers. He tossed them onto the table, his eyes like daggers. "You never paid any child support. You haven't talked to her in 3 years. You've got a record of debt, been kicked out of at least 3 different apartments." He tilted his head, a cold smile on his face. "You think a judge will give her to you?" Clara went white. But William wasn't done. He threw another file onto the desk. "And here's proof of your money dealings. With Vanessa Sterling. You took her money right before you came back here." The room went quiet. William slowly crossed his arms, his voice full of disgust. "You sold your daughter twice, Clara. And now you think you deserve her back." Clara didn't say anything. Her hands were shaking, her face as white as a ghost. Finally, she glared at Elena like it was her fault, then turned around and stormed out without another word. William watched her go, finally relaxing his shoulders like a weight had been lifted. Elena stood there frozen, her heart beating fast. She swallowed. "You knew, didn't you?" William turned, his blue eyes looking right at hers, sharp but gentle. "I've known for a while," he admitted, "but it never mattered." Elena forgot to breathe. William stepped closer, his eyes burning into her. "Family isn't about blood, Elena. Family is about who stays, who fights, who loves no matter what. And I chose Sophie the second I held her, and I'll keep choosing her no matter what." Elena couldn't look away, but before she could say anything, a little voice came from the door. "Daddy." Sophie was standing there, with big blue eyes, looking up at them. Her voice was quiet. "Do I have to leave?" Elena's heart broke. But William didn't hesitate for a second. He crouched down, opening his arms. "No, honey, you're always staying, I promise." Sophie ran to him, burying her face in his chest. "I love you, Daddy." William held her tight, his eyes flicking up to Elena's, a silent promise. Everything was finally settled. A few days later, William's lawyers said that Clara had officially dropped her case. With no chance of winning, she left the city without a trace. Vanessa Sterling had also lost. After they found out she was stirring up the trouble and bribing Clara, her reputation was ruined. But for Elena, the best thing wasn't beating Clara or Vanessa. It was seeing Sophie laugh more, sleep better, and not be scared of being left behind anymore. One afternoon, Elena was standing in the Lancaster estate garden, watching Sophie play with William under the golden light of the setting sun. The little girl ran to them, her eyes shining. Daddy, Miss Elena, can I make a wish? William knelt down, pulling Sophie close. What do you wish for, Princess? Sophie looked at both of them, then smiled. I wish we could always be a family. William chuckled, looking at Elena with a soft gaze. Then you don't have to wish for it, Sophie, because that's always going to be true. He reached for Elena's hand, holding it tight. Family is a choice, and I choose you, Elena. Forever. Elena squeezed his hand back, her heart overflowing. She had spent her whole life looking for a place to belong, and she never knew it would find her. And now, looking at William and Sophie, their family, their home, their forever, she knew she had never been more sure of anything in her life.